Hi, welcome to this episode of the CCCX Industry Update and the latest interview. Today, I'm really pleased to be speaking to Don Haddaway, the founder of Artesium. He's been working in the CX and software industry space for 30 years, and he has a reputation for strategic innovation and leveraging new technologies to maximum effect. Artesium specializes in large-scale customer experience strategies and the design and implementation of platforms that span multiple technologies, such as cloud, contact center, bots, natural language solutions, automotive, AI, and conversational analytics. And in my years working in the CCCX space, Don and I have spoken on a few occasions, and we were both recently at the Sabio Disrupt event and got talking afterwards and decided that there's a topic that I think would be really useful and relevant to people listening, and that is improving CX and EX employee experience through diversity and inclusion. So, Don, thank you very much for sharing your time with me today.
Thank you, James. And as you say, we've known each other for a little while, but it's good to sort of start exploring some different views around the whole CX piece and I guess agent experience as well, and the whole world of customer interaction is a reflection of the real world. So yeah, good topic.
Absolutely. So we've got 5 questions we're going to run through. Going to be asking Don, obviously, about his experience, what he's seen going on out there in the marketplace from a point of view of diversity, and what the effects of a lack of it can be on business performance and customer experience. We're going to have some tips for business leaders that might be listening and thinking about how they can put diversity into practice within their contact centers and within their businesses, and also for job seekers and for people that are out there in the world of work at the moment and are thinking, is this a barrier to me? How can I overcome that? And leveraging Don's experience to help us with that as well. So question number 1, obviously you're a very experienced CCCX professional operating at the top of the enterprise market. What's been your experience recently of diversity and inclusion at the senior levels of business?
Gosh, so my experiences haven't necessarily been brilliant. I mean, so first thing first I'll say is that I'm not an activist or somebody who sort of sort this stuff out or this particular topic out and think, yeah, there's we got to do something, we'll do something. This is something that really, from my perspective, has dawned on me from a few years. It's kind of crept up on me in terms of the whole topic of seeing diverse faces, diverse backgrounds, and that's male, female, socioeconomic, right across the board, and seeing where those people are, or the people you meet, either at different levels within the whole sort of contact center world, in terms of from agents up to supervisors to managers, operational directors, board directors, etc., and really seeing the different mix of people over the time. And for me, as a strategist who gets called in by companies to help them come up with roadmaps about how they're going to make the world better in terms of more efficient, but also how they face off to their customer base, the fact is that once you get to the board levels or CEO levels, etc., of organizations, there is definitely much less diversity. Now, the reason you obviously asked me that question is because we obviously were at the Disrupt conference. The topic came up, and I hadn't really thought about it openly and honestly for some time. But the point is that whilst my personal experience has been that having presented to boards, pretty much it had been from, if I look in the last 20 years, it had been pretty much zero diversity in the boardroom. If you're looking at the diversity in terms of female, my experience is that you've got female members of boards who have started to appear in there. So I actually did some research on this, because my own personal view is one thing, but I can't be everywhere seeing everything with every company. All I can tell you is all the different companies I've been to, what I've seen. And what I have seen is a distinct lack of diversity. Female diversity has jumped, and if I look at there's some research from an initiative that was started by government, which is the Parker Review. It's a guy called Sir John Parker who started this stuff back in 2017, really looking at the lack of diversity in the FTSE 100, 250s, and 300 companies. And there really was. And I think it was like 1% of board directors back in 2017 were female. But that's now risen in the FTSE 300 to 33% female.
Wow.
But on the diverse side of that, in terms of ethnic diversity, I think it's still measured in the very single figure percentages. So there is a problem or a lack of representation that occurs at those upper levels.
Mm. And if representation is narrow at the strategic and tactical decision-making level within B2C organizations, what impacts do you think that will have on CX and therefore potentially revenue?
I think it shows a lack of or a breadth of thinking more than anything else. The whole point about diversity is it's not just a color thing. It is also a how would you put it? The diversity of thinking, neurodiversity. That's the term I was using. Neurodiversity.
Yeah.
So men think differently from women. People think differently from one background to another background. Your lived experiences inform how you think, how you see things, the perspectives that you put onto the world, or the lenses that you view that world through are based on what you've lived through or what you've seen or who you associate with.
Yeah.
And from that perspective, given that, you know, if you're looking at power companies, you're looking at utility companies, you're looking at automotive companies, how you face off to your customers or how you address them, how you relate to them does relate to how you're, and if everybody in your organization has been to the same schools, thinks the same way, does the same thing, always going to the same place, always hangs out at the same place, and there's generally sort of 1 degree of separation in those places, and it's not deliberate, it's just one of those things that happens, then you're missing out on how you engage with a significant part of the audience. And, you know, ethnic minorities make up something like 30% of the UK population. I think that's right. I need to check my figures, but I think that's about it. But the point is that you can't cater for their views, approaches, needs, etc. And it's a really subtle thing. Is you know, does it make a difference to how you engage with something? Well, actually, it does, especially from a socio-economic point of view. It really does.
Absolutely. I think, you know, we can all as consumers think of examples of where we've felt like we've really connected with someone either in person in a shop or an organization, or online or through chat or whatever it might be, and normally there's some commonality and empathy there, but you know, how do you have that commonality, that empathy, if you're coming from just a totally different place in terms of thinking, background, every aspect? So I think it makes sense to me that as much diversity as you can get as possible improves the CX.
And true, and there's a degree of comfort in whether you're talking to somebody either who looks like you or understands exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and
that's not always the case, but it does help in a lot of cases. You know, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in retail, where depending on your age, you know, people do like to either see or meet people who understand them or talk like them or can relate to what they're saying or how they're interacting. You know, so, you know, my mum is getting to her 90s. She's, I think, 89 now. She lives in the Caribbean. And she's online, big star. You know, she's WhatsApping me and sending me, she doesn't do TikTok. I don't do TikTok either. But she's always sending me, you know, GIFs and various other things. And, you know, so a lot of what she had to do, even in the Caribbean, is done online now. And so the people that she sees or the people that you may have to interact with through a video chat, you know, it has to feel authentic rather than it's one size fits all.
Absolutely. One of the things then, you know, a contemporary issue that's everywhere at the moment, ChatGPT, AI in general. What do you think the implementation of AI into CX can do for diversity and inclusion for the customer?
Well, that's a really complex one, and I think I remember when they first introduced some of the big data models for Google and various other things. And yeah, it's autonomous, it knows what it is, and it turned racist in about 3 minutes. So the problem is, now it's not something you're going to trip over immediately, but there is a big opportunity to really nuance how people are dealt with.
Mhm.
And to take a lot of other things into account in terms of, there's demographics in terms of their socioeconomic background, not necessarily the race background in terms of an automated response. That may make very little difference. But understanding where somebody's coming from, the socioeconomic mix, etc., that makes a massive difference.
Mm.
Because ChatGPT on its own or an AI assistant is only as good as the data it's feeding off of, or the data set that it's feeding off of. And if that data set is just, you've got an account, you're in arrears, or you've got an account, you've got a lot of money, that gives it very little to work with. But if there are more details behind it, in that if this particular person is in arrears, plus there's other data that's associated with that can help it to nuance that particular interaction, or that interaction with that automated person or that automated entity, the more information it has, the more nuanced that information, the more personalized it can be.
Mm.
And really, there are things that, I mean, I can't necessarily think off the top of my head of any particular faux pas that could be gone into by a chatbot, but there are many of them out there, and I'm sure if you
Yeah.
call the internet, there's lots of things a chatbot will do, because it doesn't know what it's doing. It's repeating almost verbatim what it's been fed, and adding up, 1 + 1 + 1 equals 3, or for it 1 + 1 might equal 5, depending on what you told it. So it is important, but the detail and the nuancing of that interaction is what will suffer if it's not fed the right information.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all going to go back to the data, and I think there's an ethical consideration around that as well, and the use of AI and agent assist to support people in perhaps representing themselves as something they're not, in order to try and create commonality and improve CX. But there are so many layers. I was talking to a very good friend of mine who is the head of recruitment at a large CCAS solutions provider, and we were talking about this. He runs recruitment across multiple regions, and so diversity and inclusion is a real hot topic, varied all over the world. And I was saying to him, well, what about an AI solution? And you could sort of see him put his head in his hands and say, oh, ethically that's just a nightmare. But
don't leave it to the machines, or don't leave a machine unattended.
Absolutely. So for leaders listening, then, people that are running businesses, running contact centers, could you give us one example of some really excellent ideas that you've seen put into practice around diversity, that you've seen that have benefited the CX and the employee experience as well? Can you think of one business? You don't have to name names, or maybe you can.
Well, actually, do you know what? I will name names, because it's a positive thing. And
Awesome.
so one of my roles that I have is I do judging for European Contact Centre of the Year and various other sort of contact centre award ceremonies. And one of the ones that struck me, I visited Vodafone in Stoke-on-Trent. Great contact centre, and their I guess management style and the way that they had gone about really promoting people from the floor, agents, and making sure that they systematically worked with people to help promote them from positions of agents into supervisors and beyond, worked really, really well. And there was one particular lady that stuck in my mind. She was a single mum, had seen very hard times, but was as sharp as anything, very smart indeed. And she'd given us a story whilst we were doing the judging. I was absolutely blown away, because she had worked her way through the ranks, and was clearly starting to make moves into supervisory and management, etc. And you don't really see that in that many places. So to Vodafone, I would say kudos to them, did a very, very good job. But more importantly, that systematic identification of yes, inclusion, not necessarily directly based on race or anything else, but because you're including people who are good at what they do, not where they came from or what school they went to, etc., etc. So it's a meritocracy, but it's an unbiased meritocracy that's dragging people through or pulling people through. Huge effect, because she knew how customers should be greeted, what sort of challenges people were going through. She understood challenges and hardships that had been gone through for people in the cost of living crisis, and was bringing that knowledge through the ranks into supervisory, etc. So that's the sort of thing that you want to see, where people have been through. And you know, it's how the world used to work. Maybe it still does, or very little. Where people used to work from the shop floor up to the boardroom. And even I can't remember the guy's name from Tesco. You know, started literally on the shop floor, stacking shelves, and suddenly, you know, fast forward 20 years, he's actually in the boardroom, actually doing it, but understood every aspect of how that organization worked, and also understood what the customers were like and what they wanted and the sort of things that worked and didn't work. So that's one example of good.
There you go. Round of applause for Vodafone there. I'm speaking to you from Newbury, so they're a big employer locally, so that warms my heart as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, aren't you? That lived experience, I think you said it earlier on, that is going to trickle down then through the people that individual mentors, directly manages, just talks to around the coffee table, right?
Yeah.
And then that transferring through layers, through that person, but through the people that they then come in contact with, onto the customers. And that emotional intelligence, that empathy, and you don't know where that's going to come from. So that's where, again, inclusion, diversity in all its aspects is so critical. And of course, customers having that experience, you're going to see loyalty, and you're going to see it spend as well. So it is going to directly impact.
And it's and inclusion is not a bad thing. And often you will see when people talk about, you know, diversity targets, etc. And people sort of wrinkle their noses a little bit. And actually, what's an interesting thing? I did have a piece of, so I'm going to read off the side here. You know, what diversity means. It means different things to different people. And as part of a study, I think it was the Financial Reporting Council asked a number of directors what their view on diversity was, and it was what popped to what they call a top of mind study, which says, okay, not gun to your head, but it's literally right straight away, not going to give you any clues. What does diversity mean to you? And diversity to board directors in this study came out that in at number one was personality, number 10, that was 55%. Number two was gender at 11. Number three was age and experience at 10%. Right down at the bottom in terms of the other point about diversity, ethnicity and race came at 1%. So, but the point is, and I can understand that shouldn't have a bearing on it, but the lived experience, what you've been through, what you've done, does inform personality. You can't necessarily separate personality, gender, age, experience from your ethnicity, because it's just part of who you are. And but the fact that diversity, that race and ethnicity was at 1% in terms of from the top of the head, that was really, really interesting. Okay. But you know, personality, etc., neurodiversity, yeah, fine, I understand that, but that does come part and parcel. We are complex, multifaceted beings. We don't come in separate boxes and separate pieces.
Yeah. And so final question then. So this is tips for people. You listen to what Dom's got to say and you think, okay, that's great, but how do we go about changing this? How do I as an individual go about changing it? You know, and so tips for people then that are in the CCX space, entering it now, of any group that want to rise through a business, or maybe like yourself, like with Artesium, go on and set up their own business, what tips would you give them for propelling their own careers forward, that then in turn will help both companies and the general business landscape with diversity and inclusion?
I mean, it's difficult for me to say because it's a really complex subject. Okay, from a personal standpoint, my only approach to this in terms of I can't come at it from a diversity point of view because I am what I am. All I can come at is be very good at what you do, be good at what you do, understand and give quality at every turn. The fact is you have to be conscious of what I call your wake of influence. When you walk into a room or when you do whatever you do, even if you're not talking to somebody, you're actually leaving an impression with those people. So try and leave a good impression of what you do. And that's not necessarily, kowtow to people. It's be good at what you do what you do well, and your work will speak for you. For companies, in terms of diversity, the whole point is that what they should do is really look at what I call scanning the horizon. There are lots and lots of people. Don't always look in the same places and referrals from the same people. It's a broad old world out there. And, I know we've had Brexit and various other things, but, just within the UK, there is so much talent that exists at multiple levels. And some of that talent is rising. So, and especially in now the digital age, because a lot of the people who are coming up are digital savvy, very aware of social media, the whole digital space, the use of, chatbots, etc. And they are very aware of how those things work. And really what they will not have done is necessarily gone through the traditional channels of XYZ school, private this, private that, or whatever else. They will just be time-served practitioners who are now digitally native and will be very good at what they do, and more importantly, understand it at depth. Now, for those people who may lack some of the other skills within the area, where it's outside of the digital native piece, the fact is those skills can be taught and learned. So it's really looking to bring people up, but also leveraging what their base skills are and their understandings from across the world. But having diversity is huge. And I think there was Gary McCann who was from I think the chairman of Flutter, which is like the people who are in Paddy Power. He said that there have been enough reports, statistics, evidence-based to stop talking about it and actually get on with starting to recruit people from diverse backgrounds, because it does work. So it's known, it's seen, and the fact that you've got Sir John Parker's review that's running. They had the 1 by 21 project, which is to get one person from an ethnic minority background onto each FTSE 100 companies by 2021. And I think they got to 89%. So that's just one person they were looking to get on the board. But it's horribly complex. But it should be all completely transparent. As you say, learned experience of where people are from and the diversity of thinking will also drive that well. So that's the only advice I can give.
Wonderful. Well, again, thank you for your time. Fascinating to hear your thoughts. Very much appreciate the research. I guess that comes well prepared is amazing.
Yeah, no, so I just wanted to share it because it's such a deep area. You have your own view, but actually there's a lot going on out there. But it's a big thing for companies. It's an important thing for companies because,
absolutely,
as you say, that the digital world is completely different, and so the people who are going to inhabit it or good at it are going to come from all sorts of places.
Definitely. Well, anyone listening to this got any thoughts, feedback, anything like that, obviously you can reach out to Don. His LinkedIn will be on the newsletter. Reach out to myself as well. We're always keen to hear feedback. As Don quite rightly said, it's a really complex issue. Really hard to unpack in this length of time, but I again really appreciate your input and your time. So thanks very much, Don.
Brilliant. Thanks, James.
Thanks.